Hello out there, and here we are, guys, at the end of another year doing a top 10 list for 2018, and man, how quickly this year has gone by. It seems like only yesterday that I was doing the list for 2017 and struggling my way through that, and this one is even tougher. It has been very difficult to compile all of my thoughts and reviews and opinions into a list of 10 knives, only 10 knives that are my favorites of the year, but we're going to try to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to go through it. There's going to be a lot of stuff that you probably don't agree with, a lot of things that you might see differently, but yeah, it's going to be fun, and it's going to be definitely open for discussion in the comments down below, so I definitely want to hear from you there. But yeah, like I was saying, guys, this decision, all these decisions were really difficult because even more so than last year, 2018 has just been a year of a bunch of knives. You know, as the channel grows and my involvement in the community grows, more and more knives are just coming into my hands over the course of the year, and yeah, it just makes the decisions even harder and harder. There's so many good ones out there. I think the marketplace is just improving as a whole too. The quality of the knives that we're seeing from a bunch of different manufacturers, it's just increasing, which is a good problem to have. And yeah, on top of that, I just think a lot of companies just up to their game. So there's just a lot of good stuff to talk about and a lot of exciting stuff. And yeah, let's just get into it. And let's start with the parameters. So there are some parameters and ground rules, and then there are some honorable mentions, and then we'll have the top 10. And the first ground rule, I guess, that's what we're going to call it, is that in order for a knife to be on this list, I have to own it. So I've reviewed a lot of knives over the course of the year. Some of them were loaners. Some of them I borrowed or just had for a short time or was serving as a middleman for and never really owned. And yeah, those knives that aren't in my possession anymore, they can't be on the list. If I liked it so much, I probably would have bought it myself. It's sort of the mindset. And if it can't put it in front of you, then it can't really be a part of the top 10. So some really good knives that are going to get left off for that reason. The next rule is that the knife has to be in production. Not necessarily a 2018 release, but it has to be something that's easily accessible and, yeah, still being made right now. And so for that reason, like a knife like the Kaiser Cordo, that's eliminated. A knife like the Berg Blades Iron Pup, which is only released in like small batches and nothing like consistently, that's eliminated. And every GEC knife, since those are all pretty much limited, even though there are a bunch of different variations, yeah, sort of off the table too. So doesn't mean they're not great, but you know, there's another list for those, another video maybe to be made about that kind of stuff. All right. Also, anything that I already have a like variation of that model or that design on the list for is going to be left off, meaning that this copper matrix, there is another, I guess, a sibling of this model on the list today, and so that's not going to be on here. And then the last one that we have in front of us is the Chris Reeve Incosi, and I sort of eliminated this one just from price point because it makes the whole discussion a lot less interesting when this is thrown in the mix. Is this my favorite knife of the year? Arguably, yeah, it is, just on its own. But it's also by far more expensive than anything else that you're going to see today. And yeah, so it just doesn't seem really fair to have this on there in competition with those. But obviously, I really, really like this knife. I won it in a raffle near the beginning of the year, and yeah, it's been everything I wanted it to be, which is definitely a good thing. But yeah, just for the sake of having a video of knives that are more accessible, we are going to leave this one off. And now let's get into the honorable mentions. The 4 knives that just missed being in the top 10. And the first one is a knife I picked up at Blade Show West. It is the Steel Will Mini Gecko. Really good knife, really well built. Arguably my favorite lockback of all time. Just a big fan of this one. I haven't reviewed it yet, but I'm still planning to. But yeah, just excellent knife. Just not quite in the top 10. Another one is the Wii Rectifier. This could have been very high up in the top 10, but for whatever reason, I just don't carry it. It's a good knife, really well built, good action. Yeah, just isn't one that I really reach for. Another is the Burnside Knives Carmen. Review on this one is actually coming soon. It will be a top 10 things to know about. And yeah, I really like this knife, but not going to be in the top 10. And then finally, it's painful. It's really painful to leave this one off the list. But the CRKT Willy. Guys, I've talked about this knife so many times. I'm the only one who likes it, I think. And for that reason, I just really wanted it to be on there just so I could, you know, give it its moment in the sun. But it just isn't in the cards, guys. It's a great knife, in my opinion. I really like it, but it just isn't one of the 10 best of 2018. So now let's get into the things that are. Starting with number 10. Number 10, it's the Honey Badger knife. The Honey Badger knife is one that made the list mostly because of the modification work that I was doing on them and the amount of fun that I had with that. And you have to keep in mind, guys, that that this list, it's my favorites. It's not really the best. If it's the 10 best, then I don't know. That's just a whole lot less interesting. You know, the things that call to me and resonate with me are a little bit different than just best. And yeah, so this knife, even though it is 8CR13 MOV imported, it is a really good quality knife for right around 30 bucks. 3 different sizes. The small one was my favorite. And then every time you see these tan scales, it means you can dye them and just do some mods on them. And yeah, so that's what I've been doing a lot of. I actually just came across this one the other day. Didn't even know I had it, so I've got more mods to do on that. So yeah, really good, interesting knife. Not sure if we're going to see more from this company, Western Active, or if they're just going to keep coming out with honey badgers, but we shall see. All right, and getting into number 9. Number 9 is a knife that I really tried to leave off this list, and it is the Kershaw Method. The Method, I like it. I like a whole lot about it, don't get me wrong, but it just kept being on the cutting block when it came to this list, trying to figure out what was going to make that final cut. 8CR13 MOV, Jens Anzo design, liner lock. The thing that kept it on the list is every time I get this knife in my hands, just actuating it, this has arguably my favorite action of any knife that came out this entire year. And it's only 25 bucks. It's just so nice and snappy. And what's funny is that, like, with the Fraction and the Atmos and some of the other manual Kershaws for the year, I feel like the Method just sort of got left out and people just didn't give it much like credit or consideration. And that's a mistake. This is a really good knife, a really good $25 knife, and it's so much fun to open. All right, getting into number 8. Number 8 is a Tangra. And yeah, the Tangram Vector right here, a button lock, and I think the button lock is really what did it for me. I really like this knife. I like the action on it. I like how classy it is at the, I believe it's like $39 at regular price, but it's at discount a lot of times. We have the aluminum frame here, the button lock, and then like, I guess it's basically like 440C Akuto steel. But the big thing with this for me is that this is one of those knives that it looks a lot more valuable than it is. I mean, this knife can mask as a really classy gents piece, and people might think that, you know, it costed $70, $80, $90 just in how nicely it's built. You know, and the only thing that's holding it back from doing that is the steel. So, yeah, just really impressed with this knife, and it's another one that every time I get it in my hands, I like it more and more. Not necessarily for someone with larger hands. If it were any smaller, it would be a struggle for me. But as it is, it's just a really good offering from Tangram, and yeah, one that just impressed me from the beginning of the year all the way to the end. All right, next, number 7. And number 7 is actually the most expensive knife on the list. And it is the ZT0393. And this is a knife that I've sort of slow played. You know, I've owned it for a while now. I haven't really done anything in terms of getting it on camera. No review or anything. But it was one that the first time I saw it, I said, that is going to be my first Hinderer ZT. I just thought it was so attractive. And the 20 CV steel, just everything about this knife as far as looks just jumped out at me, which is unusual because the harpoon blade isn't usually my kind of thing. But yeah, I carry this knife a lot. It has lived up to every expectation. I personally believe that this knife looks extremely attractive. I love the coating on the flats and then the satin on the grind. I really like this G10. I like the blue. I mean, every aspect of it, even though it might not be like what my tastes usually line up towards, it works for me on this knife. And it just is odd, you know, I see a whole lot of mods on these and I see like a custom scales and I keep thinking, why? It doesn't need it at all. Why? This is like perfect as it is. I just really like this knife and I think there's a lot of value actually at the 200 plus price point. It's expensive, but I feel like the bang for the buck is there and it is just a really good knife. So yeah, really excited about this one. Certainly not the most accessible, but I think when it comes to ZT and Hinderers, this one was really well done. So that is number 7. And number 6 is a very recent release, and it is the Kershaw Bare Knuckle. Bare Knuckle, a knife that so many of us waited for so long. Like I said, this knife right here is the reason why the copper Natrix isn't on the list, because they're essentially the same design, just a little bit like tweaked. Yeah, is that a cop-out just so that I could get something else on the list? Absolutely, I will admit to that, but you know, decisions have to be made when you're making a tough list like this. But anyway, back to the Bare Knuckle. This is one of those knives that it could have been number 1. It could have been in the top 2 or 3. It's just such a nice, warm addition to what Kershaw is doing. I think Kershaw has really upped their game in the budget realm, just executing a whole lot better and giving us some good offerings. But it's a knife like this at the $65, $70 price point, USA made, Sandvik steel, that really puts Kershaw back in the discussion of like high quality USA made knives that are relatively affordable. Extremely impressed with this knife, the 7777. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it. When it comes to value, actually, there will be another discussion with this knife in the near future on my channel. And I'll get back to that actually a little bit later on in this video, but for right now and where it is at number 6, like I said, getting into the top 5 on this list is extremely difficult. So again, this is just very subjective, and 6 doesn't mean it couldn't have been number 1, that's for sure. So number 5, we are getting into the first of 2 straight Benchmades. Number 5 is the Mini Freak. The Mini Freak is a knife that, for me, just does everything that it expected, everything that I expected it to do. It delivered. The rubber grip on this mini version is an improvement, I think, over the large version. It just works better in a small package. S30V blade steel, the action and the lockup and just the execution of this knife was very good. A lot of people, and myself included, you know, I've seen Benchmade in the past struggle with fit and finish, and a lot of their knives that I've seen in 2018 have just been a huge improvement on some of those issues that we've seen in the past. This is no exception. This one has just been spot on in terms of lockup and centering and action. Yeah, you can see this is a first production. I had to get this knife right off the bat, and I did. Then customizing one of the other ones with Rogue Bladeworks scales. This knife is just, yeah, it's just been one of those good user knives all year long. And yeah, just that's really it. Don't really know what else to say about this one, guys. It's just, yeah, it delivered. So, and I think being able to get this kind of quality, I guess, at the $110 price point is a pretty big deal. So, very good by Benchmade. The next one is also a Benchmade, and it is the Savi V, coming in at number 4. Number 4 for this Saibu. This was one of my most sought after knives. When I walked into Blade Show, I immediately walked to the Benchmade booth and bought this knife within the first 5 minutes. I knew I had to have it. It is not a cheap knife, coming in at $212, but the execution of it, all the little details, the things that they did, and actually it being functional as well, just make this a very, very good piece. Impressed with the design. I've always been a fan of the Nakamura stuff, but just every little aspect of it, from the clip to the action to those little inlays of the wood inside the thumb stud, yeah, the 20 CV steel, everything just, it just hits. It hits on all cylinders. It's a very cohesive piece, almost artistic, but still very, very functional. It's one of those knives that every time I decide to take it out and carry it, I get excited about it. And you really can't say enough about a knife like that. So that's number 4. And then number 3, man, number 3, it is the Savi V Backlash. And this knife, guys, this knife is a special one. I have not reviewed it. I picked this one up at Blade Show West. I did not understand what Savi V was doing until I got this knife in my hand, and then it made perfect sense. There are people talking about the Savi V line at the $40, $50, $60 price point, just how they're going to change budget blades, and I don't know if that's going to happen. Honestly, when it comes to budget, I think that other companies are doing a really good job too, and they're finding their market and their audience. But what Savi V is doing is they are really executing at a level that I haven't really seen before. Earlier in this year, I reviewed the Wii Practic, all right, the Wii Practic, and I gave it a very good review. It had M390 G10 on bearings, and I think that's like a $150 knife. This knife right here is a $45 knife, I think, and the only thing about this knife that isn't as good as the Practic is the steel. That is it. Every other aspect of this knife, the look, the execution, the action, the G10, everything is just as good as that $140, $150 knife, without a doubt. That's impressive. I had a number of drafts of this list where the Savi V was the number 1 knife. Because it's subjective and we're talking about my personal favorites, it's not the number 1 knife for me. But when it comes to value and execution, I mean, just look at that. Look at the blue liners with the tan scales. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a great looking knife. Yeah, my buddy Slicey Dicey picked this as his number 1 knife, and God, I can't argue that at all. It is that darn good, guys. Super impressive. Some of their other models I don't like as much. Some of their other models I don't see the value in as much, even though they're good. But this knife is just, it's just something different. Check it out. See for yourself. All right, number 2. Number 2 is the CRKT Oligo. Yep, another budget knife coming in at number 2. Again, this comes down to personal preference, and it comes down to, you know, a lot of history with me and CRKT, and me wanting them to be as good as I know they can be, and then them delivering. And that's exactly what they did here. They knocked it out of the park with this knife for $30. Just a really nice EDC budget kind of beater. When you think about what CRKT is trying to do, you know, the reason why they stick to their 8CR all the time is that they're trying to have a good build, a good design, and good execution with a more budget steel that is still really functional. And I agree with them. I like that philosophy. I think that sometimes they fail and sometimes they succeed. And this knife is one of those knives, a lot like the Savi V actually, where, you know, if you put a blade of a different material into this frame, you could sell it for a ton more money, because everything else about it, the aluminum, the action, the bearings, I mean, everything else about this knife is on point. So the only qualm that I think anyone should have with this is the steel. And for me, that's not a big deal. I like this knife at 30 bucks. I like it at 40. I like it at 45. So yeah, TJ Schwartz design. Excellent job with the liner lock. Great lockup. You can see it is going to show some wear as you use it. Whatever. Not a big deal. I just think it does everything that I want it to do. And it really is, for me, one of the best CRKTs of all time. And it is a major, major player in showing that they are still a legit budget knife making company. So that is number 2. And then number 1, it had to be. I came up with a number of different options, a number of different winners, and every time I kept coming back to this knife, guys. This had to be the number 1 knife of the year for me. And this is the Case and Southern Grind CG0. You can see by Southern Grind, the Case knife, S35VN, manual flipper, aluminum frame, just a beautiful knife, and one that was executed really, really well. It's a special blade. It's one that I got as a gift from my wife for my birthday, so I mean that makes it a little more special for me. But yeah, it's just one of those knives that that every time I hold it, it gets better. And maybe it's a little bit more expensive than a lot of people would like. And again, I was talking earlier about a conversation in value. And I will be doing a comparison with this one versus the bare knuckle, because there is a good conversation to be had there, especially seeing that the price point of this knife is right around 180 bucks, I think, 190 maybe even. So it isn't cheap, but God, they just killed it. I love the blade design. Let's take a look at this. Absolutely love the blade. The jimping, I mean, just the amount of jimping that you have so you can choke up. And the lines of the knife, like where the knife fits in your hand ergonomically, and how the blade angles downward from that, just the way that it feels in hand when you're cutting with it is just, it's spot on. It's absolutely spot on. So nothing fancy about this knife really at all. It's just beautifully executed, looks great, functional. Yeah, it's awesome. It's an awesome knife. And to be honest with you guys, the fact that not too many people have this one sort of gives it some more appeal. It's out there, it's available. It just isn't one of those things that I'm seeing too many people pick up. And yeah, for me, it's the best knife of the year. So there you have it. I think you should. If you haven't checked this one out, it's definitely a good one to pick up and a good one to have. So my thanks to my wife for that. But yeah, this is the number 1 knife of the year for 2018 for me, and absolutely my favorite. So that is it. A whole lot of good stuff though, guys. I mean, like I said, the list is my favorites. It's not really just the best. I mean, there's so many good knives to talk about, so much conversation to be had. So let me know down below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions? What's your favorite knife of the year? What's the knife that I didn't have on my list that I absolutely needed to have on there? I'm sure like the Spyderco Capara, but you know, I don't own that knife, so it can't be on there. But a lot of other stuff for sure. So let me know about that, and I'll talk with you guys soon. Thanks again. Thanks for a great 2018. Have a good one, and let's get a great 2019 ahead of us as well.